All right, welcome back once again. This is the Moon of Israel, Solonomics 101 Left Project, but we're currently broadcasting live from Liberty Lessons. And you know we come over here where we have a very interesting topic to speak about. So I want to welcome everybody today. And we have a guest host. We have Sister Mayana here, who's always my co-host when we do these special broadcasts. And then we have a guest host, a guest panelist, which is Hannah Spivey. She's the author of Why I Abandoned the Hebrew Israelite Religion, as well as another book. Sis, what's the name of it? Well, she's going to tell you what the name of the other book we're really speaking about today. That particular work that she has done, within this conversation, we're going to address some of the concerns such as misogyny, multiple wives, multiple camps, multiple doctrines, community poverty, and basically current events and how this all ties into the Hebrew Israelite narrative or conversation. So with that said, I want to welcome everybody. If you have any questions or comments, as usual, just go ahead and put it in the box, and we'll get to them if you have for the guest host who's on. As well as we want to say for everybody involved, the commenters as well as those on the panel, we keep it clean, we keep it professional, no profanity, no defamatory type statements that's going to, cause any necessary repercussions. So with that said, I'll go ahead and give it over to Sister Mayana. And then we're going to come to Sister Hannah and officially allow her to introduce herself. So, Sister Mayana, I'm going to quickly alley-oop it over to you so you can address the crowd or the people as well as our guests. Sister Mayana, the mic is yours.
Well, good evening, shalom to everyone on the to our guest Hannah and to everyone listening in. I think that one of the things that we want to open up. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well, yes.
Okay. One of the things that we want to establish early on is that Liberty Lessons, as well as many of the conversations that Amuna and I have, are for the edification of our people, and that it is not for use or dissemination without the express permission of Liberty Lessons, Amuna, or myself. All of our information is to be only for the edification of our people, and the conversations that we have are also to that end. Hannah, we're going to talk to you about some of the concerns that you expressed in your memoir. Because it's an academic setting, so some of these interactions and some of these conversations and some of the things that you reveal may be used for that purpose. I'm hoping that you are comfortable with that. Your participation in this interview is to that end. If there is ever a question that we're asking you that you are uncomfortable with, you obviously are free to decline answering those questions. Because again, this is an academic setting, and it's something that we do to edify the people. So I think that to begin, just so that we have a clarity on what your concerns are, you should go. I want to yield the floor to you so that you can go ahead and express those to us, and we can go ahead and begin these conversations.
Okay. Can you go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, the things that I'm sorry, I can't pronounce your name. How do you pronounce your name?
Mine is Mayana. Hers is Emuna.
Emuna. So basically, the guidelines of the show is the concerns, and just based on my personal experiences as far as like the misogyny and the poverty within the community, the Hebrew community, as well as the multiple doctrines and the plural marriages. I mean, because I pretty much had my experiences with all of the above. And I mean, I've had people ask me about my experiences, and I've been pretty open about it, but I detail more of my experiences within my book. And just from what I've seen of like a mutual friend, April, address the other, I guess, a few days ago or maybe a week ago. And she was just saying how an Israelite sister was saying that if you don't wash your husband's undergarment, then you're not honoring him. And I understand that you and I kind of like clashed on that. And I felt the need to speak on that because I have a father who's a Hebrew Israelite. And I felt like, well, I wrote a book about it. I've been part of that community, so I addressed how I truly felt. And when you had said that outsiders shouldn't speak about your community, And that's where we kind of had that
Correct.
discord, because I feel that, people in the Hebrew community do talk about people who are not part of their community. And I feel like, well, I use the old expression, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you don't want people to do the same to you, then you have to give other people that same regard. So it's not like I have any type of beef or anything like that, but it's more so about, before you address what's going on the outside of your community, it's best to address what's going on within your community. And like those things that you mentioned, it's like the highlight of tonight's show is the misogyny, the poverty, and all those things. That should be cleared up first. I mean, yes, it's not going to happen overnight, but I feel like, well, nobody is perfect, no matter whether you're Hebrew Israelite or you're Muslim or you're Christian or you're Jewish. So, and that's my take on it.
Okay, well, since you brought out the conversation that transpired on one of our sisters' thread, and to be clear, what I stated to you, or actually what I stated without talking to you, you responded to a statement that I made. That statement was that outsiders were not in the position to make assertions about what is going on the inside, and you responded as if I somehow mentioned your name, but for you particularly, you in particular, you stated that we are not doing this and we are not doing that. You were not in the position to say what is happening on the inside. Because, for example, you said there are no women giving better information to other women. There are no women protecting the women who are inside the community. Now, as an outsider, you don't have that kind of information for you to make that particular critique. Because, for example, I think that Amuna, as part of our invitation to you, indicated to you that that is something that she and I, among other women, have been doing quite extensively. There are I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 YouTube channels that belong to just Amuna. Not to mention the fact that just recently we have concluded a series every Monday that address specifically the relationship challenges of Hebrew Israelites from all of the topics that we're mentioning now and more. So for you to say that there are no women that are speaking against these things, there are no women who are interceding on behalf of the women, there are no women who are making diligent efforts to discern the difference between doctrine or agendas and what Torah actually teaches, or doing anything to heal the community, you made those statements as an outsider. So my position is that you were not speaking from an informed position. You don't know what we're doing, and you made a lot of accusations. And it wasn't even as if you said, understand also, although I didn't address you, what you wrote was you mammies and so and so. So, I mean, I think that this position that you're saying that one should not critique, or what's good for the goose is good for the gander. No one insulted you, but on these threads, you immediately began to insult Hebrew women. And I didn't insult you, and I would not encourage our women to insult you, even with the idea of what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I don't agree that we should respond to you the way you have come for the daughters of Israel. I would 100% say that is not good for us to repeat that kind of behavior. Instead, what I said to you is like, instead of having this particular kind of back and forth, where as what you call discord could grow, I invited you onto this forum with our other sister Amuna so that we can communicate with you and get a clear sense of what your concerns are in an environment that isn't going to be hostile, and we can communicate in a way where we understand one another. So I want to be clear with you that my position that you are not here, so you don't know what we're doing here. It would have been better to say, are there sisters who are reaching out? What kind of things are you guys doing? I'm not there. I don't know. I can only tell you what I see. That would have been a fair statement. I can't interfere with what you observe, but you were making statements as if they were fact. You are you are engaging people and saying, I know this for a fact. This is what they are doing. This is what you believe. This is what they teach you. And that's not, it's not a fair statement, ma'am. It's not something that we are doing. And you aren't asking us. You are speaking from an authoritative position that isn't yours to hold. And that is something that I was trying to convey to you, that I will continue to try to convey to you. We are opening. If you have questions for us, absolutely, we will embrace you and answer them. But if you are going to assume the position of telling us from the outside what we are doing inside, I would have to stop you there.
All right, for those who just joined us, this is Amuna Yisrael with Sister Mayana Hasofaret, as well as our special guest, Hannah Spivey. Today we're talking about, again, I wasn't on the thread, so sometimes people mix this up because our name sounds similar. I am Imuna, and Mayana is the one who interacted with you and invited you on. So that's just for clarity as well as clarity for the audience. Now, going forward, because you have a number of questions possibly, or things that may have been, troubling to you as you wrote in your memoir, you can go ahead now and either, because I do remember that a portion in your book was a question to Hebrew Israelite women.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you at this time would like to ask specific questions as it relates to, because like Mayana is saying, we cannot take away your experience, but we can offer you clarity as relates to you not generalizing across the board that your experience over here means that everything over here is going to be the same. And so hopefully we could provide that and allow you to discourse with us. So with that said, do you have any questions, like straight out the box, what would you like to know? What have you seen? What are your concerns? The mic is yours at this time.
Okay, so before I speak on the questions, I would like to piggyback off of what Minyana was saying, because she was saying that I was speaking in an authoritative position, and I disagree with that, because I'm giving my experiences, and I feel like I have every right to talk about what I've gone through. It's no different from any other woman who talks about being abused or whatever her experiences were, or whatever she encountered. And I mean, I talk about what I know, not because of what I believe, because I've been there. I can't say that every Israelite woman has been abused, but from what I do know, those women in your community have been abused, whether it's psychologically, whether it has been verbally, whether it has been spiritually. And I mean, it's interesting because it's not like I'm trying to speak in authoritative tone and trying to oppress you, because I know what that feels like. I know what it's like to be around a control freak, which happens to be a male. And I mean, the males within your community are very authoritative, because they speak about, you need to be submissive just because they're male. They were born a male, so they feel like they have every right to rule over women. And I mean, and it's not just me, but I mean, it's people all over social media that speaks about the Hebrew Israelites, and they talk about, from what I've seen people make some, they have positive things to say about your community as well as negative, but mostly from a negative standpoint. And some are speaking from their experiences, whether they've been part of the Hebrew community or not. So to say that I can't speak about that is unfair, because you got Hebrew Israelites who are speaking negatively about other people who, you allude to as the other nations. You're speaking to Christians, you're speaking to Muslims, you're saying that they worship a false god. I mean, you can't try to claim everybody who does not acknowledge you. I'm not saying you personally, but I'm just talking about from my experiences. And as far as the discord that you and I were having the other day, I wasn't calling you any type of names. When I said mammies, I'm talking about the Hebrew women that I've seen who are very male identified, who identify with the males who treat them like garbage. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying every Hebrew Israelite woman is a mammy, but more so the women who are very male identified and who put down other black women.
So your response to that is to put down black women. So this is what. So again, what was problematic for me is that you wanted to. First of all, when you talk to us, you tell us that your concerns are coming from this loving place, and it's very hard for me to find the loving spirit behind addressing these women as mammies. A lot of what you have done is criticize. You're criticizing. You are very negative in your assessments. And again, my position is still the same. That you are doing this from the outside, and you seem to have a your your principal objection is me saying that you are on the outside. By your own admission, the title of your book is You Have Abandoned. You've abandoned supposedly us. I don't think there's been too much of a backlash to that, but you've abandoned. So if you've abandoned the community, then obviously you are an outsider to that community. So I'm not clear on why you are so offended, or you're objecting to me saying that you are an outsider to the community. That's the position that you have chosen.
Okay, well, can I ask you a question? 'Cause I know you guys were mentioning if I
Sure.
have any questions. Now that you're Hebrew Israelites, I can ask you this. I can't assume or anything like that. But haven't you
Correct.
also been critical towards people who are not Hebrew Israelites who are still Christians? Because most Hebrew Israelites have started out as Christians. Some grew up Hebrew, but were raised in the Hebrew thing. But then you have Hebrew Israelites, people who came into the Hebrew thing, and they came into who they are as a Hebrew Israelite or what have you. So, I've seen other Hebrew Israelites who are very critical and who do assess other people who may do things, who may live alternative lifestyles or different lifestyles. So, when you think that would be kind of hypocritical, because it's very common in the Hebrew community where they're criticizing other people, especially especially when they're known for being very angry people. I'm not saying all Hebrew people. I'm just saying just from the outside perspective, and even from the inside perspective, because I've been there. But don't you find it kind of, it's kind of hypocritical to say that I can't speak, even though I abandon it, but that also speaks for the Hebrew Israelites who abandon Christianity, but still speak negatively about Christians. Wouldn't you? I think it's hypocritical, but because I don't feel like I can't speak
Okay.
about it, which I have a right to, like anybody else who may not know a lot about your culture, but they still do.
Mhm.
Especially if they've encountered
Okay.
Israelites who were not very nice.
Well, as you have asked and answered your own question, I will answer you anyway. No, I don't feel it's hypocritical, because it is I am the one making the statement that you, as an outsider, do not have the information to say what we are doing on the inside, and it's me who I can honestly say that I don't go around inserting myself into Christian conversations, uh, critiquing their belief, their behavior, or their practices. I don't find conversations where Christians are talking and say, oh, and decide I want to point out what's going on in their communities, or how they are conducting their belief systems, or to what degree they have appropriated and misused Hebrew culture. I don't go around making those comments to them. As I told you on the thread, I am highly disinterested in people outside of this community. If people from the outside have questions, such as yourself, I will embrace them. I will answer those questions, but I'm not going out knocking on anybody's doors and lighting fires on anybody's lawns simply because they have not come to this place that I am in. I don't have that kind of leisure. I'm not a person of leisure in that way. The work that needs to be done inside my community takes up far too much of my time for me to be inserting myself in conversations in other communities, worrying about what they are doing. So no, I absolutely do not find it hypocritical for me to make the statement that I made.
No, well, what I mean by that, I'm talking about your Hebrew Israelite counterparts. Do you find it hypocritical of what they're doing? Because, like you said, you don't insert, but you did insert because it's something that you're very passionate about. And keep in mind, when I made my insertion, it's on a public forum, even though it's a mutual friend. But she had every right to say how she felt, and she gave you know, her opinions about how she felt about what the Hebrew woman was saying about not serving your husband because you don't wash his underwear or whatever. So I felt like, yeah, I have the right to insert just as much as anybody else. And yeah,
Your
you
question
made
to me was, no, let's be clear. What I said was I don't go into the Christian conversations and insert myself in that. You said that I did do that, which I did not do. I was on an Israelite thread talking to an Israelite sister about a conversation between Israelite women. So again, I don't insert myself in conversations outside of my community. All you are saying is that we have a mutual acquaintance. To you, she's a mutual. You're calling her a friend. That does not take away from the statement that I made that I don't go outside of my community and insert myself into conversations. So the fact that you said that I did, that's clearly inaccurate. It's clearly false. You're not going to find any type of contradiction in my statements. I don't go into other communities. Now, to ask me to comment on what the entire Israelite community is doing is not going to clarify your question. You want to say that I have made a hypocritical statement and that I have inserted myself into these spaces. The fact that the reason I was able to say to you that you are doing something is because I'm not guilty of it. I don't do any of those things. I do not go into these conversations and I don't go into these spaces. But what I do is if someone who is outside of the community has a question and is willing to at least have a conversation, I will keep those doors open, just like I opened the door for you. I didn't judge you. I have no. If you don't want to be part of the Israelite community, I'm not going to get the tethers and get the chains and get the ropes and drag you over here. If you want to go and be among people with alternative lifestyles, as you have stated, I'm not going to pull you away from that. That's not my goal. I don't get commission on saving souls. My job is to have the information available and to reach out to my people, and that's what I do, and that's it.
Okay, well,
all right. I want to just one second, sis. I want to say thank everybody who's just joining us. For those who have joined us, you might be a little confused. We're doing a little backstory. I'm kind of catching up on the backstory as well as it relates to. This is author Hannah Spivey. She wrote a book, Why She Abandoned the Hebrew Israelite Community. Religion. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So as we catch up to speed, because again, I did have the ability to look through some of your social media, some of your references to Hebrew Israelite, and again, the tone oftentimes of these posts, of these interactions, of one that may seem a bit antagonistic. They asked what may be possibly the purpose of you expressing yourself, although everyone has the ability to express themselves. Why do you choose to express yourself in such a antagonistic way towards the community if one could understand that your words, A, have power, and B, you are broad brushing, you are painting the community with a broad brush, and how responsible is that as a literary person, as an author, as a person who's in the public eye? So at this point, I'll ask you that question as it relates to how you choose to express yourself about the Hebrew Israelite community as a whole.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I'm a writer, so I'm very expressive. And the things that I say is mostly geared towards, of course, the Hebrew Israelites, but people who come off as very arrogant and very self-righteous, of course. And I mean, that's fine if you disagree. The point I'm making is what I say is it's not as, it may be harsh to most or to some people, but it's not comparable to what Hebrew Israelite women, or basically women throughout it could be Hebrew Israelite women, it could be Muslim women, it could be Nuwapian women. I mean, I can't say that no woman within the pro-black community, no matter what she identifies with, has not been abused, because in every group, there's black women who have been abused. And what I say is not comparable to what black males are saying to black women, especially within the Hebrew community. I've seen very disparaging words said about, the word mammy is, of course, it's not a nice word, but it's not comparable to what the black males say to you, calling you the B word, calling you the.
You called us those words.
I'm sorry.
What about all that? You've called us those words and more in your memoir. You have. And what you cloak as a question, you have a list of scathing adjectives directed specifically at Hebrew Israelite women. So, I mean, Mammy is just what you wrote on that one thread at that one moment. But your memoir is peppered with vulgarity that's tailored to Hebrew women specifically, and it is your stated position that you have, at minimum, an affinity with the or at least some passing affection for Hebrew women, just because we're black women as well. But that's not reflected, as the sister's trying to express to you. It's not reflected in your memoir. It's not reflected in your conversation. It's not reflected in the way that you are choosing to express yourself. It would be if it were the case that you were trying to reach out to the sisters and say, listen, you're in a bad position, that some of the things that are happening to you are not acceptable, and you were reaching out some sort of helping hand or exchanging resources or just in any other way showing some kind of comfort or support. But there's nothing comforting or supporting in A, the language that you have chosen, B, the way you have chosen to present your message on various platforms. None of it is healing. All of it is just simply scathing. And that's what doesn't reconcile with your stated intention and your demonstrated expression. Those two aren't reconciling. So that's kind of what we're reflecting back to you. It's like we hear what you are saying, but then we are looking at what you are doing, and we're asking you for clarification on why those two don't look the same.
Okay, so as far as me referring to Hebrew Israelite women as the B word, I don't recall mentioning that in my book. Now, I'm sure I may have said that there are Hebrew Israelite males who refer to you as the B word. And the thing about it is, I feel like you're overlooking, the fact of how those males treat you within your community. Even if you don't, I understand you consider me as an outsider, but I mean, let's be real. We know that the Hebrew community is suffering. It's the black community as a whole is suffering. And my issue is, you have people who identify as Hebrew Israelites who says way more worse than what I say, threaten to rape black women within your community, threaten to kill you within your community. I haven't said anything to cause black women to get killed. I haven't wished anything bad against Hebrew women. The most I would say is that there are black women within your community who are male identified. And that's just as bad as the males who are saying atrocious things to you and are doing atrocious things to you. Now, like you were saying, I'm not coming from a very positive place, of course, because my experiences have not been positive. It's no different from a person who's writing a book about their experience as a Muslim or whatever negative things they've encountered in their lifetime. Yes, I have the right to address those things. I've had people who were part of the Hebrew community who have commended me for what I did, and some of them were males. So you may not agree with where I'm coming from, and that's okay. But I stand firmly behind everything I say, as much as you stand behind everything that you say. And yes, I'm all about, because I'm a mother now. I'm raising a daughter who is black, and because it's bad enough in the Hebrew community, or not me, well, the black community as a whole, how they try to omit black women's history and overlook black women. It's always about the black man. It's not so much about the black family as they try to make it out to be, but it's more about a liberation of black men. But what about black women? Because when a black man gets killed, I know I might be going a little far off the subject, but when a black man gets killed, then everybody's expected to protest for him or be on the sidelines for him. And who are the first people they reach out to? Black women. When black women get gunned down either by a black man or by law enforcement, then she gets called all types of atrocious names. So I like you were mentioning earlier on the forum, when you and I was having our Discord, and you were saying that you didn't feel like you were inserting yourself. You feel like you don't have to explain yourself. Okay. Well, you did comment though. Wouldn't you agree that you did comment? When you said that outsiders should not speak about your community. And that's what we had that Discord at, because it's like, yeah, you're saying that we can't talk about what's going on in your community, but your community is suffering just like all the other communities as well. And that's what we have that clash.
Since you asked the question, let me answer it. What I said to you, first of all, what I said in general was outsiders cannot comment on what is going on inside the community.
Right.
That is what I said. You don't know what we are, because you were telling us what we were doing inside. You don't know what we're doing inside because you are outside. That is what I said, that outsiders cannot comment about what is going on inside. You can't see. You don't know. All you can say is what you have experienced. I won't take away from you what you have experienced. I cannot take away from you what you can observe from your position outside. But see, you don't seem to accept that your position is outside. You want to go and make comments about what's happening in a space you don't occupy. You were making statements that were ill-informed, uninformed, because you are not in a space to make that decision. You cannot say what the women are doing on the inside. You are not here. You can say, this is what it looks like to me. This is what I remember experiencing. I had no problem with you making those statements. The second thing you keep trying to do is say that I inserted myself somewhere. This was a Hebrew Israelite conversation. I said that I comment in my community. That was a my community conversation. It was with an Israelite sister about a conversation by another Israelite woman. Both parties were Israelite. I didn't insert myself into a community outside of my own, which is what I said. You cannot keep saying that I inserted myself somewhere and that I have misspoken. What I am saying is correct and true. I was in a community conversation, and what I said to you was not that you weren't allowed to have an opinion or that you were not allowed to relay your experiences. What I said to you is that you cannot tell us what we are doing. You are not inside. You are on the stoop. We are in the living room. You're not inside the house. You are outside of the house, trying to tell us what's going on in our bedrooms, in our bathrooms, and in other spaces. You don't know. It would be better for you to ask. That is what I said.
Okay.
But I just want to make sure we just keep it nice and let me make sure I'm gonna check and see we gotta keep it nice and cordial and decent. And definitely this is part of conversation. We have to get and bridge and get beyond miscommunication. And even if we may have at that space and time, again, I wasn't on the thread, I don't know, but I definitely wanted to see if we can cross this bridge a little bit and touch on some of the other questions that you may have. The reason why you may be getting some of the feedback that you're getting or the conversation is that, like my Sister Mayana said, Sister Mayana has been and continues to be on the front lines for years as it relates to Hebrew Israelite women and what they experience in a positive, reassuring way. I don't know if you know, have come across my work. I have been on the front lines for years in my own capacity. So the feedback that you're getting is the narrative that you are presenting. There are parts of it that are true. There are issues within the community. There is doctrinal issues within the community. There is abuse of power within the community. But the reality is everyone is not a head wrap wearing mammy sitting on the sideline and subscribing to everything that the male domination or conversation is saying. And so this is what we're trying to convey to you, that when you broad brush and just go by what you experience and not broaden your lens to understand that that is not the totality, because at this point the world is watching and your words have power. So when the world is watching and you're saying this thing, someone can go in easily and quote what you just said and say, this is the truth. I'm a Hebrew Israelite for many years. I have not experienced that abuse. I have not been beaten. I have not been all of the things that you are saying. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so for you to paint this narrative, although in some areas there might be some truth to it, we cannot say that it is true across the board. And this is what we're trying to convey to you. So if possible, can you ask another one of those burning questions that you wrote in your memoirs or something else that you wanted to hear? I know you probably never saw us before or don't know that we even exist, or, you know what I'm saying, never been exposed to women of our caliber before in your journeyings. And this is what this conversation is about, is just meeting new people and understanding, wow, I didn't even know you guys were there. But if you can't ask another question, if you have another question, because like I said, I don't want to ask the questions for you, but you did ask it in the book. So are there any other questions that you had? Or if Sister Mayana has the book up, if you can't remember off the top of your mind, she could present them and see if you remember where you were when you wanted to know these things. That would be helpful especially for the listening audience. So I'll give the mic back to you.
Okay. Well, I never said the whole entire Hebrew Israelite community as a whole. Let me just correct it. Let me just make that clear. And yes, I understand that there are Hebrew Israelite women who have not, who have not encountered being abused per se, but it does not deny what's happening within the community with the Hebrew Israelites. And like she was saying earlier, she's when our mutual friend made the post, she was saying that she was only speaking for the Hebrew people. Well, again, we're talking about Facebook, social media, where anybody, and I'm sure that she don't just have Hebrew Israelite friends, but she has non-Hebrew Israelite friends. They're going to have opinions. And you also mentioned earlier that you understand that we're going to have an opinion. So why can I not say what I know? But I'm talking about what I know. I'm not making up stuff because this is what I do know. Because the Hebrew community, and I even mentioned in my book, at the beginning of my book, excuse me, I mentioned at the beginning of my book, my baby's crying, so excuse that. I mentioned at the beginning of my book that I have met a couple of decent Hebrew Israelites. I did not paint a broad brush saying that there was every Hebrew Israelite that is negative. I never said that.
Yes, you
So
could
let
get
me
the
just clear
baby.
that up.
You could get the
Give me
baby.
1 second.
Get,
Give me
get
1
the
second.
baby. Get the baby. The baby's like, where you at?
Okay. So so the
Yeah, we
question I
gotta take
do
care of
have,
babies.
I'm sorry. So the
Hi,
question,
baby.
hi, she's on my
Hi,
lap
baby.
right now.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is, 'cause I know that in the Hebrew community, the man is supposed to be the head, and then above the man is the Most High. My thing is, do you feel that a man, because he's a man, that he's automatically the head, or well, let me rephrase that. Do you feel that all men are leaders because they're men, or because of what the
Of course
Bible
not.
says?
Okay, the Bible doesn't say that all men, by virtue of their genitals, are leaders. So that's another thing that I found in your memoir, is your complaints are not unique to your experiences or the people that you have come into contact with. Instead, you liberally place blame on the text, and you say your Bible says this and your Bible says that, instead of saying the men you have encountered have said this or they have said that. Our Bible does not say that by virtue of their genitalia they are automatically qualified to lead. So our Bible does not say that. That's an answer
Okay.
to your question.
Well, let me, because I think there's a little misunderstanding. Give me 1 second. Okay, let me just say that the men with the males, I'm not going to say men, but just the males, I'm talking about the negative, the negative males. They believe, and I mean, from what I've observed, they say, well, I'm a man, and you're going to obey me, and you're going to submit to me. Excuse me. I'm sorry. My apologies.
No, absolutely.
So my question to you is, and I'm not talking about the Bible right now. I'm just talking about, what you interpret from the Bible. Do you feel that men are the head of women? Give me 1 second. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay. It's okay. Give me 1 second.
No problem.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Okay. Okay, boo boo, calm down. Okay, I'm back. Okay, she was asleep earlier, so I do apologize for that.
No, that's understandable.
Okay. Okay, calm down, calm down. Okay, she been a little. Come on, boo boo. Give me one moment. Okay.
That's okay. Hannah, if you want to if it's better for you mute mute your mic until you're speaking, you want to do that?
Yeah, give me one moment.
So that we can answer your question?
Sure. One moment.
Okay, so Amona, do you want to answer the question?
Oh, y'all know I was just sitting here talking to myself all on mute, right?
Yeah, you on mute.
I want to say welcome, Sister April. Sister April has joined us.
Hello.
To the conversation. And like I said, I know how the baby business goes, so it's all good. We mothers, so we just rock with it. This is conversation that we're having in between, so it's not like, oh my goodness, I can't believe the baby's crying. It's all, you know what I'm saying? So for those who may have questions or comments at this time, what we are doing is discussing. We have Sister Hannah, who's on the line. She wrote a memoir. Again, she's entitled to express her experience. And what we're doing here is addressing some of the concerns that she expressed in her experience. I believe if Sister Mayana can read some of those questions Sister Hannah had as it related to Hebrew Israelites, because this conversation came about. I wasn't on the thread, but it was a conversation on
It was my thread.
And okay, so Sister April, can you give us some clarity? Because all of us, except for Mayana and Sister Hannah, we're like, well, what y'all talking about? So
Okay.
some clarity on the thread. Go ahead.
The thread was about a conversation that I had with an Israelite woman, and pertaining to my submission to my husband. And so the conversation was, I chose to hold my husband in a point of accountability. There are certain duties in the household that I delegate for my husband to do when he comes off work. I don't think that, I think that you should hold a man accountable for the things that he does. He's a man, he works and goes to work. When he comes home, he has an active place in the house. I chose to tell my husband, look, I take care of the kids. It's a full-time job. We're all mothers. And that I feel that this is my obligation. This is my responsibilities. And you need to do yours as well, as far as yourself being a adult male. It was not to take away from my husband. It was not to belittle him, but it was to give him a task for him to complete. So, everybody has their own task. No one's confused. The woman basically took what I said and said that you're not submissive enough because you don't do A, B, C, D. You cannot speak on my submission to my husband. You do not know my position with my husband. This is my marriage. And, I have friends who are not Israelite women who agree with that. They agree with that standpoint. They agree with that wholeheartedly, that if you are a man or a woman or whoever, you're an adult, you have certain obligations and certain responsibilities. And my husband is essentially not a child. He's a grown man. And I do what I have to do, but as well as him doing his tasks as far as taking care of the house. There was some disparaging comments, back and forth. There was a woman who was an agent. She was attacking me on my own post. I didn't know she was an agent, but I was told by other women she was. And so that is where the disconnect came from, as far as, my sis Mayana making a comment and then my sis Hannah making a comment back. So that's where it kind of was, and where I'm coming from is where I understand it is that, I know both of these women. I know Mayana very well. I've known her for 3 years. I've known Hannah for 3 years. I've known you both equally, not as much as Hannah, but I've known Mayana. I've called Mayana. Mayana's been there for me. I think the disconnect is Mayana feels like she's been in this culture, she's been in this faith, she's helped women and took time away from where where she's been at. She's done the job to earn the title of helping her women. And I think that, Hannah's saying, I've also been in this situation. I've also been a part of the community, and I don't want my opinion or my views to be not respected, even if I'm not a part of the community. That's what I got. And I was trying to get them to look at the same point, that we both have a common point to battle misogyny in the community. Whether you be a Black woman in the Israelite community or not. I know that you only address Israelite concerns, and I understand that, Mayana. But, it's basically to combat the situations that happen in our community, being Black women. And that's what I got from it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you so much for the clarity, because I was a little lost. Sister Mayana, your thoughts on that? Is that accurate description of what actually happened? For those who just joined us right now, we're speaking with our Sister Hannah, and we have Sister April on the line. We are talking about something that happened. Social media is a space where people post stuff, and you think it was like live in person, because so much stuff happens, and it goes so quickly you can't necessarily catch up. And so it spills over into how we view one another, what we think about one another, what we say about one another. And this is all part of universal principles of how people say, how can we get along? We have to learn how to communicate. We have to learn how to get beyond when we have had some misunderstandings, or when we really feel a kind of way and we need some clarity. So Sister Mayana, and then I'm going to come to Sister Hannah as it relates. Mayana, if you can speak to what Sister April just said, as well as I think you have the text in front of you, possibly bring out some of those questions so that Hannah can either go deeper in or give us a more understanding of what exactly she wants to know. So at the end of this day, if someone is watching and they may have one experience, they can at least broaden their understanding to understand that there are different things happening. So Mayana, the mic is yours.
Well, from the portion from her memoir, I believe it is roundabout I think, because it lacks numbers, it lacks numeration. I believe it may have been chapter 12. There are 22 questions. They're listed as questions. About 10 of them are specifically addressing women. Because of the nature of our forum, I won't be able to read the questions verbatim, because despite what our guest is asserting, a lot of this language that she uses towards the women are very caustic. So, for example, question number 4, which is the first of the 10 questions that address women specifically, in essence, it reads, for Hebrew Israelite women, you have a problem with the feminist movement, but why don't you have a problem with the Bible calling you a dog, harlot, whore, and Jezebel? Now, looking at just question number 1, this is not a question, it's an accusation. This is a cold judgment wrapped in a warm blanket. The Bible does not call us, being Hebrew Israelite women, a dog. Torah says that a dog does use the word dog, but it is in reference to male temple sex workers, not women. Jezebel was a woman. She was also a foreigner. She's not an Israelite. Neither are we ever called Jezebel by our text. Going forward, reading also, as for the terms harlot and whore, these terms are used to describe not just women, but the entire nation in the Bible. The Bible does not consider these words synonymous with womanhood, but instead appropriates designations for activities that diminish the set-apartness of his people in favor of participation in debased and low-vibration activities. Whoredom and harlotry are liberally used against men and women. I do have a problem do I have a problem with the Bible not being specific, specifically attacking women and specifically attaching the word whore and harlot to just women? No, I don't have a problem with the Bible not doing that. And instead of complaining that such categories exist, for me, I make it my business not to fall into those categories. This first question asks, not like I said, it's not really a question. They're accusations about dogs and whores and harlots and Jezebels. This is why I asked before, when I spoke to you before, your questions are not about your specific experiences. You are attacking the culture and saying the culture is doing these things and that our text is doing these things. It's not our culture. It's what we're trying to express to you. It's not the culture, and it's not our Bible. It's not our canon. It's not our records. It's not our ancestors. It's very specific people. And like you said before, and I appreciate you, I appreciate that you said that it is not just the Hebrew community that is suffering in these areas. The black community in general are suffering in these areas. Amuna specifically has spoken on, written on, and addressed extensively that how a lot of our historical placement is informing some of those behaviors. It has nothing to do with the Hebrew culture, and it has nothing to do with the Bible. It has to do with our historical experiences as a people, as a melanated people. Like you said, this is happening in the Muslim community. It's happening in the black community at large. It is not specific to Hebrew, to Hebrew culture. And unfortunately, nothing in your memoir suggests otherwise. Everything in your memoir squarely blames for the woes of the entire melanated community.
All right, sister, thank you for that. Sister Hannah, thank you for that, Sister Mayana. That's the first question that was actually read from your memoir. Sister Mayana answered it. So we give you an opportunity to speak on that question, where you were coming from, or anything else that you wanted to know concerning that. The mic is yours.
Okay, so she was saying that my question is not a question; it's more accusatory. But these are questions based off of what we all know. I mean, if you want to, and I'm not, trying to be funny or anything like that or disrespectful. But if one would like to pretend like they don't know that they're being called out their names by males who look like them, then yeah, I guess it's some type of denial. Now, the Bible itself, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a Bible scholar.
Correct.
I'm not going to say that. I will say from the passages that I've read, I mean, to my understanding, and even the dictionary, whore alludes to women, and whoremonger alludes to men. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that is the understanding that I do have. Now, I do address not just the Hebrew community within my book, because I don't feel that Miana have read my book entirely. But
I read all 74 pages.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to go over that just to give an overview. And I talk about the Hebrew community because that's where I come from. And yes, I do talk about other things within the so-called conscious movement, not just the Hebrew community, because I've come across a lot of, very special, and I mean a very, not so good kind of way. So yeah, I don't understand that you're passionate about about the Hebrew community. That's cool and everything. My point is, I'm talking about what you guys are facing on a regular basis. And like you said earlier, I'm not there. Well, I've been there and I see it all the time. And you got other people out there to say that I can't speak about that. And like you said, it's kind of like you said, I can have an opinion, but then you turn around and said that I'm not in a position because I abandoned the Hebrew community. Yes, I abandoned the Hebrew community as far as no longer being a Hebrew Israelite, but I have the right to talk about those things because Hebrew people do it all the time. And it goes back to the hypocrisy. Everything that Hebrew people talk about against the other people who are not part of their community is also happening within the Hebrew community. I never said that all of you guys, all the males, every single Hebrew Israelite male is misogynist. Because again, I said there are Hebrew people, men who I've met, who are very decent. They did not disrespect me. But the Hebrew community is very, well, better yet, not just the Hebrew community, but the so-called conscious movement as a whole is very male identified because it is centered around the black man, whether you agree with me or not. Now, I may not be part of the Hebrew community like that, but I can speak on what I know. And I have more people who would agree with me, including the people who are part of your community.
Um, all right, we have Sister April on the line as well, and then we're going to get to see if we can get a few more questions in. I think your perspective, as all of our perspectives, is very interesting in that we're not taking, in my estimation, like Sister Mayana said, we're not taking the whole thing into consideration. Just because you wake up to the truth, whatever consciousness is in your estimation or anyone else's estimation, it does not equate that you're going to erase, or anyone for that matter is going to erase centuries of programming. And because you put on this garment or you put on a hat, you are automatically, magically, pixie dust going to become righteous. It doesn't work like that. And our expectations are, they are misplaced if we believe yesterday you was on the street, you was a thug, and today all of a sudden because I say shalom, I am no longer that. That is unrealistic. So even when I look at the Hebrew, right, more whoever community, just because you're before me with some language that you have learned or some clothing, it does not mean you have changed. And when we approach the situation in that matter, we get to say that, no, it's not white. Like I hear what you're saying, and I also hear what Sister Mayana is saying. When we approach it in that matter, then we're not saying it's the culture. It's the people. Correct. People on whatever culture they choose to put on. If the person is an Egyptologist and they was a street thug, guess what? They bringing their street thug to Egyptology. If they was a street thug and they come into Hebrewisms, guess what? The Hebrewism, they're going to put it in that whatever place until you really have a change, which doesn't often happen in the way that we think. So I just wanted to put that into the conversation for those who's listening. I did something a long time ago that said consciousness is not righteousness. And you can see the video. So consciousness is not righteousness, and as an onlooker or as someone who may be experiencing with others, when we go in with that expectation that just because you know this stuff, it means you're righteous, we set ourselves up as the people. Because we're looking, yes, we're supposed to look to hold people to a standard, but the reality is, if we honestly say we have been through hell and high water, there's no way in the world that you are going to automatically become someone else. There's no way in the world. You have to work at it. And if the people haven't shown us that they're working, our expectation of them is not realistic. Do you understand what I'm saying, sister? If they haven't shown it, just because we drop into their Knesset or their camp, that doesn't mean anything. I'm sorry to say. It doesn't mean anything because you haven't showed me that you have been working to change. And this is why a lot of women, especially, and men, have fallen behind this thing. Because we look at the garb and we believe too quickly that this person is who they say they are. And more often than not, they're not. So there's a level of responsibility in leadership, but there also is a level of responsibility for those who are seeking truth and knowledge. But I just want to put that in there. I'm going to come to Sister April, and then I'm going to come back to Mayana for another question. I know, we get into the 11 o'clock hour, and but we're going to try to get some more questions in. So, Sister April, do you have a question?
Yeah, I want to, it's not really a question, but it's a statement. I agree with her. I agree with Hannah when I say that, I believe that the black community as a whole is damaged. And, it goes back to scripture. We as a people have been torn apart. There's men pit against women, children pit against adults. I feel like the community at whole, it doesn't matter what faith you belong to, it's damaged, it's torn apart. And I feel like instead of just bashing each other, we should try to come up with solutions like, Mayana. I know Sis Mayana, she sits on the phone with sisters all day. She takes time from her schedule and her daughter to address issues that people might have, reaching them out on a personal level. And I think what I think would be best for Hannah is to reach people on a personal level. Like, okay, you may not be able to reach 1 million women, but you can reach a few sisters and talk to them and get to know them and find out where they're at and uplift them. Because, you know, me personally, I can agree with you. You know, I've been in a situation where I've been attacked by Hebrew men. I make a lot of questions. I call myself an activist because I don't like the things that go on in my community, and I pose questions to pose solutions for people to do something about it, because I'm tired of seeing the same thing go on. You know, just recently, Joyce Quarway, she passed away, and you know, I wish I could have reached out to that sister and helped her, because obviously something went wrong to where she is now murdered, and now no one knows anything except for what's on the news. You know, these two men beat her, and I'm thinking that if we could just reach one another on a personal level, as many people as we can, to say, I'm here for you. What can I do for you? How can I uplift you? How can I correct you and give you correction? I think that's a great start, you know, because it's writing a book or, you know, writing Facebook statuses doesn't do anything. It's a bringing awareness, which is great because we need awareness. But what are we going to do once we know the problem is existing? What are you going to do after that? Now that the book is gone, you know, it's done, it's published, everybody knows about it, everybody's at it, they read it. Now the Facebook posts are made, everybody's seen it, they know about it. What are we going to do as a community to fix the issue? Because we can talk all day and nothing can get done from it. What are our solutions is what my question is. What are solutions? You know, solutions bring about change, and talking about things do nothing.
I do agree.
All right, Sister Hannah, we're going to come back to you in 1 second. We're going to go to Sister Mayana once again because I read the reviews, I read the book. You know, many people have read the book, many questions, you know, and this is the type of stuff that we have to come into a space. And I would like to say I want to thank Sister April for joining us, but I think that speaking about it, you have to speak about things. But after you speak about things, then you have to do what you just spoke about. You understand what I'm saying? So it's like you have to lay out, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to reach out to my sister. I'm going to do it in love, because we're talking about broken people. So if we're looking at a paradigm, if we're looking at the men, and in our estimation, the men are doing something wrong, and they're addressing the issue in a way in which it doesn't bring about healing, and we turn around and do the same thing they're doing, well, we're in the same boat. Do you understand what I'm saying? But if we come to the situation and acknowledge, hey, we are dealing with broken people, wherever you're coming from, and I have to first, number one, this is my estimation because this is my little area right here, I have to heal myself. Because if I don't heal myself, I'm going to come and give you my distorted view of reality. And so the number one person that we have to help, because I see a lot of people on social media want to save the world, but like they say in the airplane, put your mask on first. You don't put anyone else's oxygen mask on first. You put your own on. That means save yourself. Go through your own issues. Go through your own problems. You're not going to be perfect when you address other people, but you will be to the point where I'm not going to transfer. That's what they call it. And I'm not going to transfer my issues to you. I'm not going to say because I have an issue now, everybody should have an issue. Do you understand what I'm saying?
That's
well, this is my issue, and I identify. I can see where, because I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to come to Sister Mayana. It has been my experience through my studies that when we have been damaged as children, you are going to attract, I am going to attract, we are going to attract that same energy and vibration that damaged us. So the fact that you may have attracted this level of low vibration into your life through the Hebrew Israelite community is because this is basically the message that was being sent out. Subconsciously. Oftentimes we're not aware that we're sending that message. A lot of women get in abusive situations because when they got into that space, they said, I don't value me. And if you notice, when you come into spaces and let the men know and other sisters that I value me, the narrative change. Who do you think you are? You think you're better than me? But you see, when you now are sure within yourself, and I am not going to concede, I'm not going to allow you to abuse me. Because understand, after you leave out of your parents' space, when you get into relationships, abuse to a degree, we allow it. It starts off in a way where we don't set boundaries. We allow people to abuse us. It sounds crazy and strange, but once you start taking back your space and setting your boundaries, not in a rude or disrespectful manner, because relationships are built on respect. And a lot of men and women can sniff out when someone has low self-esteem. They know, listen, I can use you. They know I can use you. Why? Because I see the way you move. And if you have a predator, what are they going to do? They're going to look for the weakest person in the pack, and this is why you may have had the experience with the mammies, or with what you term as the mammies, or this conversation. Why? Because like attracts like. And so when we spend more time, and a lot of time, concentrating on ourselves, we're not saying we're not coming from issues. We can see clearly now to genuinely reach our hand out without hurt. I don't want to hurt you. I want to be able to help you, but I can't help you if I didn't help me. So I just want to share that. I want to go to Sister Mayana for another question and see if we could bounce this question around and get some answers to it and clear up, if we can, at this sitting, anything. So Sister Mayana, and then we're going to come to you, Sister Hannah. Sister Mayana, you have another question from the memoir?
Yeah. Yes, I'll read the second question. This is the second question, actually the fifth question in the 12th chapter. But before I do, I want to make it very clear that there is no denial on my part, and all the sisters listening and here on the will very quickly confirm that if anybody is going around championing against the disinformation that the men have been disseminating to the women, that would be me. And if there was anyone who was receiving the brunt of the insults from the men, that would also be me. I'm in no way in denial that there are certain men that are very apt and very prone to being against hearing the truth. And what you are hearing, you're saying, oh, I'm being passionate about belief. I am not passionate. I'm passionate about the truth. My issues with you have always been when you say something that is inaccurate. I have not judged your experience, neither you have admitted. I have not told you you cannot have your opinion. My issues have always been with to what degree you are being truthful. And in the same way, I address the men. If you are saying something that is not true, I will address it. If it's not in Torah, it doesn't count. If it didn't happen, you cannot say it did happen. If you're going to say the scripture says, the scripture better say it. That is how I've always been. April will tell you, she will come and wake me up, tag me, email me, inbox me, text me, Mayana, I need you to show up on this thread. The brothers are tripping. And all of my sisters know I will defend the truth. And every sister will come and get me. So my big sister, they very much go on, put out the bot signal, BAHT signal, the bot, come help us. That's what I do, all day, every day, with every sister. I'm not making excuses for the men. I need you to be very clear on the fact that none of the women on this panel are making excuses for unrighteousness. We don't care if a penis is attached to it. Unrighteousness cannot stand. We are not phallic worshippers on this panel. We are very much about our Father's business and only our Father's business. Having said that, the second question in your, I believe it's the 12th chapter. It's actually the 5th question in that series, but the second one that addresses women. I can't read it because of the format, but in essence, it's a question about why women are participating, why Hebrew women are participating in polygyny. Specifically, you have a question about the extent to which Hebrew women are willing to participate in or accept this particular marriage model, and you add to that they do so even though some of them, I'm obviously filtering a lot of this language, some of them are disrespectful and have a very negative perception of their womanhood. So that was your second question in this book. So, Sister Amuna, if you want to go, I could answer it or you could answer it, but that's a fair question. It's a question about this particular marriage paradigm that has had a revival in our culture. It's one of the many times we've addressed polygyny, right? We've done webinars, we did radio segments, we did articles, we got books on the matter.
Yeah, for real. I'm gonna touch on that. I just want to acknowledge those who are in the chat room and thank them for tuning in. And just want to check on Sister Hannah, make sure she's doing all right. We have people in the chat room. I'm going to touch on question number 2. Again, I want to thank everybody who's joined us. I definitely said if you have any questions or comments, feel free to share. We have some thoughts that Sister Hannah may be being ganged up on as it relates to the conversation. What we're doing here is addressing the memoir. And the voice of Sister Hannah are the words from the memoir. We're glad that she has joined us on this conversation. I'm going to give her an opportunity to speak as well as those who are listening in to what you have to express. So I'm gonna reserve a time to go through all of this and definitely address your comments and questions. So I just want to let you know that I hear you. If that is the perception that you're getting, we're getting a mixed thing. Some are saying yes, if you guys could see the chat room, and some are saying no. These are questions that were asked and statements, and that's what we're addressing because they're directed to Hebrew Israelite women. So therefore, we wanted to provide a space that these questions can be addressed without mumbling, without complaining, without going and making a social media post. We would like to come to who asked the question, and this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we, this is how we build. So I'm going to come to that question. The second thing someone just asked here. Someone just asked as it relates to attracting abuse. I know sometimes when I speak and others speak, it may not be understood because we may be coming from two different spaces. And so this is why I clarified my statement by saying this. I didn't just get up and start studying. Everybody has been studying. I just happened to be studying this area for a very long time. So when I'm speaking, it's not to say, oh, in the mind I attracted this, but yes, if we understand spiritual truths and understand what you sow is what you reap, and whatever you emit, that is what is attracted to you. That's like asking, did the person in the water ask the shark to bite them? Are they bleeding? If you're bleeding in the water, you attracted the shark. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you are emitting something that attracts this predator. So what I'm saying is, if we are coming from childhood with injuries, mental abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, what this creates in you is a lot of sisters are coming with a level of a broken spirit and low self-esteem. This is truth. We want to talk truth tonight. This is truth. And what a lot of sisters want to do, instead of taking responsibility, not necessarily for what the abuser did to you, but how you are and how it affected you, what we look for is a man in our broken state to fill that gap. And when we attract the wrong man, then we say, oh, the men are terrible and wicked, and this is the problem. You understand what I'm saying? So there's a level of sisters in our community and the, quote, black community as a whole that we don't take personal responsibility. We don't take personal responsibility of where we are and a real assessment that, you know what, honestly, I am not ready to enter into a relationship. Honestly, you understand what I'm saying? I am dealing with some stuff that I need to purge myself. We don't do that. And so I'm gonna give it to Sister Hannah, who may want to say something, and then I'm gonna come to the polygyny question, because like Sister Mina said, we done beat that thing, till you just gotta check the reel, you know what I'm saying, on that one. But Sister Hannah, the mic is yours at this point.
Okay, thank you. Well, I like to say, like I was just piggybacking off what April was saying about, yeah, we can talk about helping people, reaching out to people, write a book about it, make Facebook posts about it. But like you said, it's gonna take more than that to come up with solutions. And I would love to do workshops about my experiences, because you still have people out there who's never heard the Hebrew Israelites. My fiance personally never heard of the Hebrew Israelites until he met me. I came across other black people who have never heard the Hebrew Israelites, and then there are some who heard of you, but they know a little bit about the culture, about, what the Hebrew Israelite thing is all about, what it means, et cetera, et cetera. So I would love to do, not just talk about the bad parts of it, but just talk about other components of the Hebrew Israelite thing as well. I would love to do more, even though I'm a mother, I'm a work-at-home mom. But yeah, I would love to go out of my way to enlighten people about my experiences and what I've studied, and the understanding that I do have about the Hebrew community, as well as the rest of the so-called conscious movement. Now, as far as you were saying, like coming from a place of hurt, I mean, yeah, when I wrote that book that's therapeutic to me. When I say the things that I say, that's therapeutic. That's me getting things off of my chest. And I've had people who pretty much commended me for what I did, even though it may come off as accusatory to some Hebrew Israelites based on the reviews that you see on Amazon. They were saying that, I mean, most of it, and honestly, they were not even verified purchases. They didn't really buy the book, but there were a few people who did buy the book, and some of them were part of the Hebrew community. Now, I'm sorry, I'm kind of blank for a little bit. You know, again, this is my therapy. Writing about it, talking about it. I have people who approach me, and I don't put them down. I don't shut them down because I have talked to them about my experiences. We've exchanged. We had this exchange about our experiences. Not once have I ever put them down personally because I know where they're coming from. I'm only talking about the people, the women included, who come off as, and I'm talking from my experiences only. They come off as very self-righteous, as if their poop don't stink. Because the main ones who come off as very self-righteous, I mean, they're going through a whole lot. Just like the Hebrew women, I'm not saying all, just to put it out there. What I'm saying is there are Hebrew women out there, some Hebrew women, or probably most Hebrew women out there, who are being abused at home by their very own husbands, yet they're putting down other women who are not part of their community and calling them all sorts of names. And I mean, so even though what I'm saying in the book, my memoir and the self-help portion may come off as accusatory, that's okay, and you have that perspective. I don't expect to reach everybody who reads my book. I understand that I cannot help everybody, but this is what I do keep in mind. If I can help one black woman, two or three black women at least, I'll be happy if I can just help one black woman. I know that I've done something, I've helped someone. So yeah, you may not agree with my disposition. It may come off as accusatory to you, it may come off negative to you, but it is still helping someone out there who can use the help, whether they're in the Hebrew community or not. And I also address the women who never been part of the Hebrew community. I've talked about women who's in it, want to get out of it, women who already left it, women who's thinking about getting into it, but not, and they're hesitant about it. So I wrote that book for multiple purposes. Even if people don't get it, I don't write to please everybody. I'm a writer, I'm expressive. So I acknowledge that I'm not going to be able to reach everybody. If what I say may offend some people, that's okay. But honestly, I'm not worried about who I offend. I'm mindful about it, but that's not my concern. I'm getting the message out there. And I'm sure there are Hebrew people who feel the same way, even though they're talking about something different. They're talking about getting other black people who may be descendants of slaves to acknowledge that they're Hebrew Israelites. They feel this is passionate about what they're doing as much as I do. So that's why, I mean, my stance is not going to change or anything like that. And yes, I do appreciate that we have this platform. And even if we don't come to a common ground about this issue, at the end of the day, whether it's the Hebrew community, the black community as a whole, there's still a lot of underlying problems. And there are obvious problems that are affecting us across the board, whether we agree or to disagree. I do this because, again, I have a father that's part of this stuff. And yes, I've had people that have commended me for that. So I'm not going to stop just because I may have offended a couple of people. That's okay. This is part of what I do because I'm passionate about it. This is what I do when I have some time to do it. Yeah, I want to do more than just post on Facebook or on Twitter or write books about it. I want to do more than just talk about it. I want to be about it. And like Emuna was saying, like, yes, I agree to an extent when you say that we attract the wrong kinds of people. However, you got people who go into it and they feel like that's part of who they are. They feel like that's the thing to be. Every group, that goes for any splinter group within the pro-black movement. So it's a place to belong. It's like family. All I'm saying is, everybody has their flaws. Everybody has their flaws. And all I'm saying is we can't afford to be divisive okay, well, I'm better than you because I'm a Hebrew. I'm better than you because I'm a Muslim. Because at the end of the day, the community, the black community is screwed up. We can't, I'm not saying that you're denying it, but it's just undeniable. It's undeniable. And when I talk about the Hebrew community, and April knows this too, I talk about other things that's within the pro-black community as well, in the black community or whatever. So I'm not just targeting the Hebrew people. The reason why I talk about the Hebrew community is because that's where I've come from. I have a father who kind of brought me up in it. The reason why I wasn't really deeply seated into it because I have a mother who's a Christian. It still baffles me that they get together after all these years because they have opposing views about Christianity and being part of the Hebrew Israelite thing. So I don't expect everybody to get what I'm saying. I understand all of that, but we can't deny what's going on, and I stand by what I know. It's not like I'm going around here making up stuff. I'm not. I mean, I had people in the Hebrew community say to me, "Well, you know, you should never got yourself involved with such and such," and I know in the Hebrew community, I'm just saying this from what I've observed, black women get blamed for a lot of stuff. They get blamed for almost everything, and I don't. It's not cool. So I'm always addressing those things.
All right, thank you for that. I want to thank everybody who's joined us and sticking with us. We're still going strong. We're having an interview / a panel discussion. So let me see exactly the name of this individual here. For Sugar Hill Lady, you know, for you to kind of understand that, like you said, you thought that this conversation was going to be an interview on Sister Hannah's book. She made some declarations within the book, as well as asking some questions within the book. And so we're having a good discussion. I'm not sure if you're enjoying the way in which the discussion is. There's no one objecting, throwing their hands up and walking out. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's nobody over here like luring people into dark alleys. So, you know, if you can kind of open up your mind and understand that you can't really all the time, you know, pigeonhole people into how you feel and how you expect something to go, because it's organic. This conversation is organic in the way in which it's going. So I want to thank you for tuning in, but understand, you know, we keep it clean, we keep it respectful, we keep it professional around here. There's some things that, in the same way that the sister has the right, this is the thing, it's balance. Sister Hannah has the right to write what she is writing, and we have the right to ask about what she's writing. Yes or no? Am I in agreement? Is everybody in agreement that, because it's called accountability? So it's the same way if you go to the press and media. You can write whatever you want to write, but when someone shows up to challenge what you are writing, or to say, hey, is this authentic? Is this correct? Then we're going to have to come into question about what we're writing, and that's all we're doing here, because the topic of the conversation is as it relates to our community. And so we have the right to have this discussion of which we're having. So I want to thank Sister Hannah and Sister April and Sister Mayana for coming through, and we all keeping it respectful. But again, it's not about ganging up, but it is about providing clarity, because everybody in their own way is doing something as it relates to what the issue is. My methodology may be different from your methodology. Mayana's methodology is different from Sister April's methodology. But at the end of the day, we have to live with ourselves to say, where did I lead the people to? Was it a self-motivation, or was it a desire for truth? Because at the end of the day, whatever you believe, we're going to have to come into account for whatever it is, because universal law says that that's what it's going to be. Whatever we sow, that we shall reap. And that's not about people who want to say, okay, you put off the Bible, okay, go plant a corn seed and tell me what you get. That's universal principle. So we can speak on a universal level to say, what energy we're putting out there, look for it to come back. And if we don't like when it's coming back, then we have to check what kind of energy we're putting out there. And so you called, we came. Sister Mayana is the one who hit me up, because Mayana knows I don't really do Facebook. I do Facebook, but not really. You understand what I'm saying? I more do instructional things. So she hit me up, and I said, all right, cool, let's move. So basically, I want to get to question 3. Oh, no, I wanted to answer the polygyny question. Like Sister Mayana.
Wait, sis, before you ask that.
April, go ahead.
Before you ask the polygyny question, I have a question to you.
Go
ahead. You know, this is triggering for me, only because I am a domestic abuse survivor.
Okay.
And my question to you is that there are women. Now, I agree with to an extent that there are women who have abandonment issues, that have previous abuse issues at home, self-esteem issues, emotional issues. I get that, but it I understand your premise in being accountable for your actions as far as getting into relationships. I get that. But how it sounded to me and how you meant it may be two different things. I'm going to ask a question. I'm
All
not
right.
going to assume how you feel because I don't know that. I don't know if that's how you came across. But how it sounded to me is that are you saying that the person is accountable for their abuse in a way? So I mean, I know you said that it's not, you can't really take accountability for what someone else does to you, but you kind of put yourself in a situation to get in that situation to be abused. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is, and I'll give you clarity as it relates to that. There's two to it. There can be, and I like speaking in illustrations. There can be an individual who did not show their abusive nature, right? And there can be a woman who enters into this not seeing the individual's abusive nature. The person love bombed you. The person gave you gifts. You didn't know the person was abusive. Up they pop and they start to abuse you. At which point we have a choice. Yes, at which point when the person starts to either be verbally or mentally, emotionally abusive, we have a choice. We can say, because it's a red flag that pops up. We can say we're going to continue, we're going to hope that this individual change. We can set boundaries, or we can say I cannot proceed in this conversation because I will not allow you to abuse me. Do you understand
Correct.
what I'm saying? But
Correct.
if oftentimes if we don't have the strength within, we often opt for, oh, the person is going to change, or it's going to get better, or if I do everything that I can do. So we start to take the blame onto ourselves and say, maybe if I change this, maybe if I change that. So
Correct.
you understand what I'm saying? So what I'm saying
Correct.
is there is a point, but depending where we are emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, we can take responsibility or we can take the blame and allow ourselves going forward to continue to be abused. Because we may
Okay.
be used to this behavior, we may think it's normal, whatever the reason may be. And so this is what I'm saying as it relates to abuse. It's not necessarily always on the surface, but when it appears, how we deal with it is going to be a reflection of where we are in our journey.
Okay. The reason why I asked is because there are women. I've reached women. I come from a relationship where I was abused, and I try to reach women who are abused, and I try to create a sisterhood in empowering them and being loving and affectionate towards them, and reach them in that way, as well as keeping them accountable of decisions that we have made in the past and how we can move forward in a positive light. I've encountered women who have great childhoods. They have great father role models. They had great, brothers and sister relationships. They had great empowerment. And then they got into a relationship with the person who was completely destructive and abusive. And I'm saying that in that light, what do you have to say about those people who have great family relationships, great family structures, and happen to what you say attract bad relationships?
And I tend not to try to, like, again, because great is subjective. You understand? It depends on what the individual will classify as great. So what we may think is great, again, a little bit of the psychology of what we may think is great. That person may have been spoiled. So in their mind, it was great. I never got in trouble. I never got beaten, whatever the case may be. They have a certain level of expectation. So it's like a balance. You can get too much of something and makes you prone to abuse, and you can get too little of something and it makes you prone to abuse. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when we say
Correct.
great, that's subjective for me, because the individual may be in looking for that boost. They're always looking for that person to feed into them, just the way their families may have catered to them, and that may create a deficiency of which they will be willing to take certain things in order to get what they're looking for. So again, each situation is tailored as it relates to how exactly they went into it. But almost, if you go into that individual, if that individual, not you, the individual goes into their own space, they're going to be able to pinpoint, why didn't I see this red flag? Because abusive situations and things of this nature are all low vibrational. If we're in tune, we know there's a red flag. You understand what I'm saying? There is a sign, but sometimes we just keep going for whatever the reason. And oftentimes that reason is because we're not conscious of what it is that we keep going for. The risk is not as so outstanding that we're not going to try to go for it, if you can understand what I'm saying. So hopefully that gave you some clarity as to my position on that. Some people may be like, oh, you're blaming it on the victim. I've heard that all the time. Amuna, you're blaming the victim. No, I'm about self.
Because that's how it can be intercepted.
I understand that.
It's a devil's advocate, because it's like you're saying that you want a woman to understand the resources of what's going on around you, to be accountable for the situation that you put yourself in, even if it may be unexpected, and to what can you learn from it and how can you move on from it. And then there's the devil's advocate, as you're going through this, but you're blaming the victim, you're making them accountable for their abusive actions. And so it's a touchy situation, because it's triggering to people who have been in abusive relationships. And that's why I asked, because I didn't want to assume that you were a certain position you were having.
Thank you for asking. And like you said, it is not only touchy, it's a fine line. It's a balance. Because when you're talking to people to say, hey, there's a part where you didn't know, like a little child, that child doesn't know. That child was born into that space, maybe of abuse. That child doesn't know. You understand what I'm saying? That child was like, hey, I'm here, and then you got some whacked out parents. You know what I'm saying? But then you have, when you become an adult, and you can make the choice, but you don't have the tools to make the choice. And so our ignorance then now puts us in a situation to continue to be abused. And someone comes along and says, sis, you don't got to continue like that. And then the light bulb goes on. You like, what? Tell me more. And then you begin to talk to that individual, and that enlightenment tells them what? I'm no longer going to allow myself to be abused. And they make different choices. Do you understand what I'm saying? So now you
right, correct.
From victim, you have become empowered.
Right.
But first we have to realize that we're allowing ourselves at a certain degree to be a victim. I will not allow myself, as we're talking about the issues that are in the black community, I don't choose to be a victim. I choose to, like Sister Hannah has chosen to do, identify some of the issues that are there, but I personally choose to go about it in a different way. Sister Mayana goes about it in a different way, and Sister April goes about it in a differerent way. And everybody else, do you understand what I'm saying? Because
yes,
we
I agree with you.
no longer to be a victim.
That's correct.
So thank you for asking for the clarity on that. Let me make sure. Sister Hannah, do you have anything to say at this time?
I mean, I'm glad that we are having this discussion. I mean, like you said, it's more of a panel discussion to kind of like clear up some things. And even if there are some things that are still unclear, I mean, I'm not. Because earlier, when Mayana and I were having that discourse, I personally didn't call her any names like that. Even if she may feel that way, but I didn't call her any names the whole time we were talking about that. It was more so me talking about the group of women out there who could be just as dangerous as the men within their community. So it's just me clearing up some things that may be misinterpreted. But again, I do appreciate that we have this forum so that we can kind of like, I guess, clear up some things. But of course, we're going to continue doing, what we do to reach out to, the demographic. So.
Correct. It's everything. Rome, they say Rome wasn't built in a day, so therefore, expressing oneself, and this is part of the healing process. Not only do the men and women relationship have been injured, the sister relationship has been injured. Because instead of being able to come to one another and say, yo, sis, the minute I say something you don't like, I'm about to hit you up and just blast you. And then that creates a bigger hole and a bigger division. You understand what I'm saying? So as everybody's saying, just having this opportunity to not agree and be okay with not agreeing without calling each other out their name and all of this stuff is progress, and it's a step in the right direction. So Sister Mayana, at this point, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Before we go a little bit further, I think that what bears noting at this point is, I heard when our guest Hannah stated that she would be open to and even would enjoy creating a workshop wherein she could elucidate some of the more positive aspects of the culture, in addition to some of the very honest truthful shortcomings of the community. And I think, number one, we want to establish that we are in no way saying that the community does not have shortcomings. Instead, what we are saying is that we are aware of them and we are addressing them, and the assumption that we are not should be addressed. The second thing is that, to the point of being an active agent in getting positive attributes of the culture out to others, you stated earlier that we talked before. You made the assertions that the Bible calls Hebrew women dogs and calls Hebrew women all of these things, and that's not accurate. And what you said was that you yourself are not a scholar in the scriptures. I think that a lot of the problems that outsiders, a lot of problems that the men on the inside and the women on the inside, it's not unique to the outsider, is that there isn't an understanding of Torah. That we don't have that scholarship. The way that Amuna, myself, and other women who have been in the trenches for a decade, 2 decades, like on this panel right now, between Amuna and myself alone, we're talking over 30 years in the trenches combined. 30 years. This is not 15 minutes. This is 30 years in the trenches. So we have studied. So when you wrote that the Bible calls Hebrew women dogs, I knew off the bat Torah does not say that. But you don't know that. But you do know that the men have said certain things about the women, and you have heard the rhetoric of the men. You yourself have been assaulted with the language and the opinion and the scathing doctrine of men. And I accept that. I understand that. I myself have heard and have been a victim of that. But the way that Emuna, myself, and other women combat that is we say, but Torah says this. Because we know what the scriptures actually say. We're not in defense of the men. We are in defense of the culture. We are in defense of Torah. In order to create workshops and to be a helpful participant in getting a better narrative, we have to first be better informed about what we are going to then disseminate to the people. Some of your questions are, for example, you say that we speak against male chauvinism, but we uphold it by calling ourselves Hebrew Israelites. I think that that's problematic. I think that you are conflating the fact that we are a patrilineal society with the idea that it diminishes the women. That our culture does not diminish us. Our culture does not place its women in a diminutive position. We're not a footnote in our narrative, even if the men would like to believe that, even if the men would like to tell our sisters that. What we do is we go out and we say, sis, that's not true. And we replace bad information with good information. We don't go and say, that's not true, our brothers are garbage. That's not true, the men are devils. That's not true, off with his penis. We say, that's not true. Here's the verse that you can look at to find the truth. We are in defense of the truth. We don't care if it's a man or a woman, cat, dog, black, white. If you're not coming with the truth is our sole concern. And I think that some of your conclusions about the community is based more on the people that you have come into contact with than the essence of the culture. And that's what we wanted to kind of try to flesh out with you, because it's not to diminish your experiences. It's not to diminish your opinion. And it's not to diminish your hurt, because it sounds like, reading some of these incidents and events that you had to endure were very hurtful. And I think that, to try to separate the fact that abuse has happened to you from the culture. The culture did not abuse you. Those men abused you. The culture does not devalue you. Those men devalued you. There's a difference, and I think that that difference is important, and that's the difference that we invest a lot of time in, and that's the conversation that we try to have with each other. April spoke earlier about what do we do to heal. What we do to heal is we take bad information and replace it with good information. You cannot make any progress if you are not better informed. You have to know what to do. You have to, in order to, it's not enough to know that 1 plus 3 is not 7. You need to know that 1 plus 3 is 4. It's not doing any, if you don't know the answer, just not knowing what it's not is not helpful. You have to know what it is in order to have a good conversation, a helpful conversation, a healthy conversation. We have to have healthy information. And that is one of the things that we are trying to do. And I think that some of the things that I'm saying to you, because all you hear from me is, I don't agree with what you're saying, you're not hearing what I am saying. I'm not disagreeing with you as a person. I'm disagreeing with the conclusions you are coming with, and I'm not saying that you're not entitled to your opinion. I'm saying that you don't know what's going on inside. If you communicate, like April said, with some of the sisters, then you would know that there's a valid sisterhood in our culture. That there's a valid sisterhood that's highly invested in getting better information and protecting women against abuses. And we do that by saying, listen, the things that you are being told, you are in the Torah, you're there. The men are not the only ones that are actively participating in the culture, actively growing the culture. That it's women that have preserved the culture in many spaces and in many ways. And it's by teaching the women where they fit, where they are present, how they have contributed, what spaces we occupy, that we build this kind of, like the sister Muna was trying to say, that sense of self-worth and self-awareness, that you don't sit in abusive relationships, but you move from them. You don't let people come and tell you that you're not valuable because you know better. You know, but you're not sitting in these relationships feeling like you have nowhere to go because people are coming to you with bad information, but you don't know the answer. So you just sit there, stuck, being attacked with language that you don't have a recourse for. And that's one of the, I don't know if we're really expressing that to you, especially since Amuna is saying that you have so many people feeling like you are being attacked, where we are unpacking some of the misconceptions and dealing with it. And sometimes that's when you dig into a scab, sometimes when you dig into a wound, that's not always comfortable, but it's necessary. It's a necessary process. But so I'm going to read a couple of her questions, sis, and just to get through some of them, and you'll answer whichever ones are we have time for, whichever ones you feel are most pertinent. Hannah, if you're okay with that, I'm going to read some of your questions, and we'll try to address them and give some light to them. And if you want to, maybe you can share with us why these questions were important to you, or why you felt like these were the questions that you had for us. I also, we had some the topics that we posted on our promotional flyer. I think that a lot of those are very good subjects. I wanted us to spend a little time on those too, because we do have an issue of misogyny in our community that needs to be addressed and completely dismantled. But that, again, comes with better information and women understanding our worth and how we participate in our own narrative. To the question of multiple women, which is like question 2, and it's peppered in some of the subsequent questions. So I believe Sister Muna will address that. The idea that we have multiple doctrines, the idea that we have multiple camps, and what was the fifth one, sis? Did you remember? There was multiple women, multiple camps, multiple doctrine, misogyny, and
poverty. And poverty.
Right, and poverty. But poverty, as we've established, poverty is not something that's unique to the Hebrew community. It's something that extends to melanated populations in general. And again, that's not the fault of the Hebrew culture. That is the fault of historical oppression and disenfranchisement. That's not the fault of the Hebrew So here's some of the questions that our guest penned in her memoir. I told you the one where she says we speak against male chauvinism, but from her estimation, by calling ourselves Hebrew Israelites, we uphold that male chauvinism. She also asks, I think that this has to do with the Edenic description of creation. Her question is, if you really come from a man, so how do you give birth to males? That's her question. And then she goes on to assert that it sounds like we're saying we are beneath the man, and that that would also mean you are beneath your own sons. And then she speaks to it being her assumption is that it's a scientific cannot be beneath anything that comes from you. I think that's an interesting
So,
assertion. But
Sister
to read on,
Hannah,
she says, "Oh,
would you like? I'm sorry, Sister Mariana. I wanted to second see if Sister Hannah. I know she has the baby there, so we're not gonna hold her all the way into the night. But did you want
right."
to clarify that question and let us know where it was coming from? Did you want us to answer that, or do you want us to move on?
I do. There's some things I would like to expound on because, as Yana was saying, that and I did address in the book, you know, calling yourself a Hebrew Israelite, okay, fine and dandy, but I mean, the Hebrew community, from what I understand, and even the Bible itself, is very patrilineal. And I mean, a lot of Hebrew Israelites, and I'm sure you might agree, but I mean, it's agreed that the book has a lot of errors. A lot of things have been taken out. A lot of things have been moved around within the scriptures, even within the Torah. Now, as far as about the Bible calling women a B word, I may have mentioned the book of Sirach. Again, I'm not calling myself a Bible scholar. And however, I'm also saying there are Hebrew people who do take the scriptures and they twist it, and they're not Bible scholars either.
That's
So
true.
it's like
Correct.
we do it, and we do address. I mean, it has been addressed many times that the Bible has been mistransliterated. A lot of translations been moved around. I mean, it's been played around with hundreds of different times. So, I mean, you have people who have different interpretations about the Bible, and then it's like that's where all the clash and all of this, the discord and all the multiple camps derive from is where people have their own interpretations about that book. Now, I mean, the Bible itself, even the Hebrews will agree that you are the seed of your father. I mean, they're not looking at both of your parents because I mean, this may be for a different discussion, but I mean, you come from both of your parents, and that's where I ran into that problem at because I come from my mother and my father. So, yeah, it is a patrilineal um, book as well as the community being patrilineal. It mostly focuses on the book, I mean the men, the forefathers, and I understand that they talk about women in there, but it's more so as men. All the scribes of the Bible are all males; they're not really women. And even though
That's
they're
not true.
Hebrews that
I
say,
got something to
I'm
say
gonna
real
touch
quick.
on that. There are Hebrews that believe that the Most High had wrote that book, but do you have any proof that the Most High wrote that book? That's all I'm saying.
Mm.
And also, I know you was mentioning about the polygyny thing. I guess you'll answer my question about that later on. But all I was saying was, I mean, you could say that you're from the tribe of whatever tribe you may belong to, whether it's Judah. I can't remember all the names, but Judah, Benjamin, Ishkar, what have you, Ephraim. Okay, I mean, yeah, you can say that you come from those different tribes, but I mean, how do you know for sure? Because I'm sure that we all have been mixed in, but the Bible, the community itself, mostly focus on the man's side, the man's lineage, as opposed to the man and the woman's lineage. So that's why I don't agree with that. I used to agree with that, but I don't anymore. But
I
yeah,
got something to say real quick. I got something to say real quick. I know exactly where you're coming from because I used to have that same issue, and it bothered me to an extent that why weren't women being mentioned as far as offspring? We carry these babies for 9 months, and we're not mentioned. So I had posed this question, and I always ask questions. I never make assertions. I ask questions. I asked this Mayana, where are the women in the Bible? And she pointed out in Chronicles that there is a woman and women were were quoted as, okay, let's say for instance you had a son and the son had a son, and everybody knows the first son gets, a certain blessing, but this one particular man who did not have sons, he had daughters, and those daughters were counted as sons. And we were reading the stories, and I was like, that's not mentioned in the Hebrew community. No one talks about that particular notion. Everyone says that there's no Hebrew queens. She was saying that there was a ruler, there was a Hebrew queen who ruled, and she made, she went after brothers. She killed a lot of, a lot of people because you say, okay, you're not gonna elect my son this, or correct me if I'm wrong, but make my son this or make my son that. Okay, I'll just deal with you this way. There are very strong black Hebrew women in the Bible. There are stories that I never saw because I didn't know them, and I've been taught from a misogynist perspective, not from my husband himself, but just from other Israelite men telling me that as a woman, my position in the Bible and the culture is small or diminished. And I had went over scriptures with my sister Mayana, and she was able to educate me about, I had told you this before in a conversation we had, that she was teaching me things that I didn't know, and I was able to go over them. And it made me feel a different way about it. And I think that if the information was pointed out, and I do believe it's taught from a lot of brothers teach sisters that their role in the Bible was small. But think about it like this. You do make a good point. We come together to make children. That means my position doesn't make my position any smaller than yours. Just because you are a particular leader or a head of a family, your role wouldn't survive without my substance, my support, my, counsel. We make up a dynamic team to create the children and raise them. So for certain misogynist brothers to say, okay, well, you're a woman, you have this position. No, my position is strong because I teach the children. The children are a nation through my womb. And even though they are your seed line, what I teach them makes or breaks them, because that's why we were taught never to mate with other nations, because those women can teach other children different beliefs. The children get taught with us. So our position is very important. You have a daughter. Whatever you teach your daughter, she's going to carry with her for the rest of her life, and then her daughter, and then her daughter. Correct? So I mean, our position is never diminished. It's how some brothers try to teach us, but that's not the case.
Right.
And I will always speak out about that. I do not play about that.
I think just to clarify, April brought out some of the points that I shared with her. Some of the details she doesn't remember. Some of the details they were originally given to her. There are posts on my profile that go into it's the woman she's referring to, and I believe it's First or Second Chronicles, the second chapter, is that there's a man that he had 3 daughters. His eldest, one of his daughters, is counted as a son, and all of her generations are counted. She marries an Egyptian, but all of her children are counted as Judah. So obviously, it's not that. Now, in terms of, and then there's the Queen Athaliah, who's from the Northern Kingdom. Everybody from the Northern Kingdom is a failed leader. So she was no exception. And when her son was assassinated, she retaliated. But there was a queen of Israelite descent who reigned in Israel. Her name was Athaliah. You find that in the Book of Kings. But again, like April was pointing out, it's that she was told certain things and other things were omitted. So the way she conceptualized things were only based on the information that she received. What women do, and I don't want to limit it to women, because there are a lot of men who are in the trenches giving out good information too. For what happens is that the more visible and the more vocal of the men who are giving out false information and recycling false information are the ones that are getting attention. But the men that are being diligent and giving out good information are kind of, in the shadows, not being acknowledged. But what I want to say, so that to get clarity on those things, that there are detailed articles on my profile that they kind of establish that. With regard to patrilineal, I don't want you to mistake patrilineal. Now, this is something that I'm speaking to you now, not as a Hebrew sister. Actually, I'm not going to I'm not going to decontextualize myself as a Hebrew, but more so, my discipline in college, my university studies, is in anthropology. So when I talk to you now about patrilineality, understand this, I'm talking to you from this academic space. We are talking about patrilineality in terms of how nations are named, not to what degree they are valuable. So patrilineality, like for example, you mentioned somewhere, oh, the branches are all named after the boys. There's nobody named after one of the women, because we are a patrilineal nation. Not because the seed has a better value and no one is considering the genetic contribution of the women, but because the naming practices came along one particular line. That's not unique to Hebrew culture. I'm not certain about you, but for example, my name, Johnson, is the name of my father. So I'm not upholding chauvinism by calling myself Mayana Johnson, because I'm claiming that's my father. That's my father's name. That's the name that he gave me. I don't know if Spivey is your father's name. According to your memoir, your parents are married. So I would believe that your last name is the last name of your father. If that is the case, are you upholding chauvinism because you are acknowledging you carry your father's name? It would be the same thing. We are carrying our father's name. Israel is the name of our ancestor. Judah, Benjamin, Naphtali, Issachar, Reuben, all of these are the names of our fathers. We are carrying their names. We are not making a declaration of chauvinism. We're not making a declaration of misogyny. We are claiming our forefathers. That's it. But Amuna and I, again, I know you're not familiar with our body of work, but if you hear us in conversation, we always refer to Ima Sarai. We always refer to Ima Leah, Ima Raquel. Ima means mother. We acknowledge our mothers. We acknowledge our foremothers. We are not saying that we live in a space where there are only men. We understand that there are, as women, in fact, April will attest to the fact that I have whole articles dedicated to the fact that women are creating genetic contributions to children, and a lot of this doctrine about the supremacy of the seed is foolishness. A lot of, because we are talking about a social construction, and it is for order's sake that we we are a patriarchal, patrilineal, and patrilocal culture. But that has nothing to do with the value of the women inside of it. And it's because we don't understand these anthropological terms that we are attaching or disconnecting ourselves from them. Oh, because we're patrilineal, there's no room for the women. That's insanity. That's absolute insanity. The fact is, and Amun and I brought it out in a conversation during one of our relationship challenges when we were discussing interracial dating. What we find the Bible saying, when there's a prohibition, the Most High says, do not give your daughters and don't take their daughters. The only commodity moving between nations is the daughters. What the Most High wants to keep separate, sacred, and set apart are the women. Do not take their women and don't give them your women. Keep the women. It's the women. The Most High is not concerned with where the men are moving around. It's the women. Keep our women here. Because if a woman, and it's just discussed somewhere else. So don't misunderstand based on the conversations of men what the scriptures are trying to say. We are a patrilineal culture and society. We are a patrilocal culture and society, and we are patriarchal. But you cannot decontextualize. You have to go back into the scripture and see, well, how does that play out? What does that mean according to scripture? Not what does it mean in the secular world, not how do feminists redefine these terms, but how does it play out in a Hebrew context? And that's what's important if you're going to talk about the Hebrew community. If you're going to talk about the secular community or the community at large, then yes, you can apply these rhetorics any way you choose. But if you're going to make a statement against the culture, there's value in knowing what the culture itself believes or practices, and what the Torah tells us to do. That's important, not just what the men are saying. That's what you do when you do that is you're saying, well, what the men say carries so much weight, and the men are so important, and the men are so dominating. I value the men over the text. I value the men over the culture. I value the men over common sense and intellectual rationality. If the men said it, it must be so. That's the opposite of what you want. That's the opposite of what's going on.
All right, sister.
Can I expound on that for a moment, please?
Kane,
Go
ahead.
Okay, because like you
Absolutely,
said,
you do.
okay, you admitted that you stated that your culture and the whole world is patrilineal. Well, don't you agree that I don't. For me personally, and a lot of it's not just me, and it's like you said, it is beyond the Hebrew community. I would not refute that, but patriarchy has been the abysmal failure, and that's where misogyny comes from. That's how feminism came about, because the misunderstanding about feminism is that the women want to be like the men. Now, there are some crazy feminists out there, but then you have feminists, people who don't really have any understanding about the feminist movement. It's not about women wanting to be like men, but they want to have the same opportunities as men. And all this came about because of patriarchy being it's just patriarchy trying to rule over matriarchy. And that's where the problem lies. That's where the whole misogyny and the whole rape and all of these atrocious things come from, patriarchy.
All right, we going into definitely. We looking like we going deep into the night, like y'all. Y'all taking us all the way over here. I'm over here like for real. But no, we actually had a conversation about that. It's actually on this channel. It's called Feminism versus Femininity. And so we definitely touch on that as well, because again, you are not wrong in your assertions of some of the things that have happened because of a mentality that societies have bought into. This is correct. We see it. It's undeniable. However, how do we separate what people have done from what people were supposed to do? You understand what I'm saying? Oftentimes, because what people have done is not what they were supposed to do, we automatically say what they were supposed to do is wrong. No, their actions is what is wrong, because again, we're dealing with humanity trying to rule over others when they can't rule over themselves. And that probably would be like a whole nother different conversation, because there's so much to talk about, but I'm enjoying it, and I kind of want to wind down a little, I guess, on this edition. Like we in an edition right now. Maybe we might have to come back. I don't know. But because this is like deep. But we might have
I want to input something. Something.
Okay, sis.
About this is how it was told to me when I first came in truth. I asked questions. I never assumed a position. I asked. And this is how I met Sis Mayana. I asked questions and I tried to get where someone is at before I make an assumption on where they stand. So this is how it was explained to me as far as, the patrilineal lines. A man, essentially we're all grown. A man's seed is put into a ground, but that seed cannot grow unless the ground is fertile. That seed is grown. It will always be a seed, no matter who you are. If you plant a seed, an apple seed, in a dirt, it's going to still be an apple seed. You're going to still grow apples, no matter how no matter how fertile or not fertile the ground is. It's still going to be a seed. The seed essentially grows an apple tree, but that ground makes that seed fertile to grow, and then it makes other seeds to grow. So like it was taught to me that as a man, as he has relationships with a woman, he's married, he has a relationship with his wife. Even though his seed made that child, that woman essentially was the fertile ground to, prolong and make that child who she is as well. We're not separated from, okay, the man is, he has the sperm and he gives us, we have the eggs and we nurture the baby. That doesn't take away from our position. Our position is very important, because without that fertile ground, that seed would not grow. And that's what it was taught to me. That even though you are a man and you have a particular seed line, and that seed makes that child who it is, but without that fertile dirt, it wouldn't be here. You can't grow seed on a concrete facility. It doesn't work that way. You have to have fertile ground to receive that seed. And just because you're a man and you have that seed does not make that my position or what I do any different, because I attribute to that child. Again, when that child is born, that father goes to work, essentially, I would hope, in an idyllic situation.
Yeah, I hope.
And I, an idyllic situation. But I'm gonna use myself for example. My husband works for the Army. He goes to work. I raise Mayana, Ebony, and Gabriella. They are getting what I give them. And what I give them, they carry out in their adulthood, I hope, and be their own people. Just like you have a daughter. We all have children. So they all take what we have, and that part, that part makes me feel better about being a woman. That even though I don't have seed, I don't want to be like a man. I don't have seed, but I'm fertile ground, and I can plant anything. And what I plant in my children, they carry on for generations and generations with their children. So I'd rather take my position, Nydia and all. Nydia is for administration. I'd rather take that position and run with it, because my position, I feel, is essential, just as essential as a man in planting seed.
And again, that might be, like I said, a whole nother topic, because again, and I just want to answer the last question and see if we can wind down a little bit for tonight. But that is something that, again, as we're talking about, when it's told from a position of someone who does not understand that position fully, we can't fully ask a man to explain, well, what do you do when you're menstruating? How can he really tell you what do you do when you menstruate? He doesn't menstruate.
Right.
You understand? And so when we totally leave it up, this is why you had a female society who would pass on from your grandmother, your mother, the daughter, that would tell you the things that a man could never tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And what is happening is, as we're returning, there are men in positions where your grandmother, your aunt, and your mother should be. And they're telling you only from what they can understand. So this is why we have to build certain walls and certain relationships, because he doesn't know what to do in childbirth. He doesn't know what to do to alleviate labor. He doesn't know what to do when your breast is swollen up with milk. He's not a woman.
Right.
And so
sisterhood is important.
He teaches you in a very hard, disconnected, intolerable way to make you, and he's an outsider in this situation. You understand? So he's going to teach you in a way that makes you feel lowly, dirty, without value, oftentimes, not all. So when the women are getting this type of information, like our sister April just said, and I'll go to the polygyny question and see if we can wind down, get our last statements. My thought just went. What she just said as it relates to the men and the conversation, my thought just went. It just went when I just said last statements. It'll come back. It'll come back. But you guys can kind of understand, the women are looking for the men to tell them everything. And the reality is they don't know everything. And oftentimes what they tell us makes, okay, this is what I wanted to say as it relates to our children. When you look at the testimonies within the Torah, the majority of the time when things went awry is when the women were not where they should be to protect these children. And so the men often would get outside women. And again, as Sister April said, they brought in outside things. And you can see that in any culture. If you're going to bring in other thoughts that their grandmother, mother, aunt, they're going to put it in the child. So no matter what the man comes and says, I don't think you should be doing that, what's the voice that they hear every day, all day long? So the woman in her space, which is her home, is very important. Sometimes we want to go outside of our home and affect everything outside and leave our home unprotected. And so, that's another conversation for another day. Lastly, sister, the question that Sister Mayana just had as it relates to polygyny, we've talked about this subject over and over and over again. It's in the text. It's in many texts. It's in many cultures across the world. Myself and Sister Mayana did and I'll share it with you. We did what is that, Mayana? A webinar a few months ago. We did a number of shows on it. The last show on the relationship challenge, we had like 18 episodes. The last show was wholly dedicated to it. We had Islamic women. We had women from different cultures speaking about it, so that we could see it's not just a Hebrew Israelite issue. This is a man issue as it relates to the concession that you can have what you want. And so all of these levels of corruption and all of these levels of abuse we're going to see because it's the nature unless it's checked. And so again, we have some work, and we continue to do some work. And also I just finished a course, Introduction to Polygyny, at the Soul Center, that speaks on education. This is what we're doing now. We have to educate ourselves so that we can compare what someone is telling us to what it is that we know. But oftentimes, if we don't get that information, we can be abused, we can be misused, we can be misled because we don't have anything to match it up against. So things like, oh, you know, you're Western because you don't want to do polygyny. You understand what I'm saying? Things like, oh, you're lowly, or you're wicked Babylonian Jezebel type. These are the control mechanisms that one uses to push you into certain corners. We have to be able to see them. We have to be able to identify them. We have to be able to know how to navigate around them. So definitely I want to thank everybody for joining us. It's been a beautiful conversation. I'm going to give Sister Hannah her last thoughts on this conversation. Honestly, sis, what do you think about this interaction that we had tonight? You know, just let us know your thoughts as we wind down.
All I can say is, I mean, it's great that you are commending. I mean, I find it commendable what you're doing as far as empowering other women. So that's something I've never, ever been against. It's just I'm against the misogyny part of it. I'm against the other problems that is affecting Black people across the board, not just the Hebrew community. And I am glad that we have had a time to have this discourse. And like you said, this is in addition. So, I mean, there may be another conversation, you know, a part two. You know, kind of like leaning on the multiple topics of this panel tonight, and then talking about other things that haven't been covered in tonight's forum. So I think it's a great discussion.
Thank you so much, Sister April. Sister April, your last thoughts on the discussion. I want to thank you for joining us. Your thoughts, feel free to let us know at this time. Sister April, she must have stepped away. Sister Mayana, what are your last thoughts on the discussion that we had here tonight?
Well, I would like to begin by thanking our guest Hannah for coming on and having the conversation and giving us an opportunity to explore some of the ways that we may have miscommunicated our thoughts to one another, and having an opportunity to flesh those things out so that we have a better understanding. It's not a consensus, a better understanding, because that is what is one of the bricks for building. Is as long as we are willing to build together, as long as we're willing to contribute to one another, then we can always, in theory, continue in theory, we can have a bridge to meet one another in a common space. But going beyond that, I like the idea that it's an addition, because there are, like I said, a lot of the points that are on the promo are necessary to be explored, and we have explored them in many spaces. And I think that maybe we can drop links under the video to the conversations that we have had. You know, we're having these, and I'm glad that you gave the plug to the Soul Center, which is going to be one of the immense resources, because we're talking about solutions. And the thing about solutions is the exchange of resources. Information is an amazing resource. It is the beginning of unpacking, excavating, and healing. And I use healing here because healing is a very big sticking point for our sister Amuna, that we heal from within. And but more to the point is the idea of providing resources. This idea of empowerment is not an abstract thing, and it's not something that we do in conversation. It's something that we do with the work of our hands and with the sharing. Like Amuna and I don't study and then don't share. We spend hours upon days and then weeks into months studying over the course of years, all manner of things. And we don't, go into our cubbyhole and high five each other. We go out into the people. We go out into the trenches. We leave our homes, right? We leave our homes. We leave our state, and we hold workshops with women so that these type of things don't get reproduced, and they don't take root and fill out false information and bad fruit. They don't take root and give out bad fruit. Sister April spoke about the very common analogy about seed and the dirt, always likening the woman to as if we're incubators for their seed. I totally disagree with that analogy. I wrote an article on my profile as to why there are points in that analogy that are problematic. We are not dirt because the dirt does not contribute genetically to the seed. People are not seeds. People have genetic information that comes from both parties. Seeds don't have that. So the problem with this is, I think Amuna alluded to it, is that we're having men create analogies in an area that they are not versed in. Okay, we see that in Genesis, what the man was told to do was till the ground. We have lost and become disconnected with the idea of what planting and yielding, and planting, sowing, and yielding. We've become disconnected from that. So because we don't understand how planting works, we're coming up with fractured kind of analogies. Because the man's first office was husbandry. Unfortunately, he is disconnected from the way that the mechanics of husbandry. So we have weird science going on when it comes to the seed notion. But like the sister said, this probably would be something we can do over the course of episodes if Hannah we'll come back and have some of these conversations so we can explore some of the other areas, like the why we have multiple doctrines, why we have multiple camps, why we are struggling with this issue of misogyny, and how can we combat it, how can we deal with it, and the current events, the fact that April brought out that a woman who was identified as aware of our community was assassinated by someone, by a man who's also aware of our community. So there are things that need to be addressed. And I think that, as is our custom, we will continue to discuss them and continue to address them. And with that, I yield the floor.
Thank you so much. And Sister Maya, we're going to have to come back with that seed ground issue, because I don't got a problem with it. We're going to have to come back and talk about that one.
I got a problem with it.
I
don't like it.
I
don't like it.
Sister April,
I can't be dirt.
I'm still learning and unlearning. Like I've only been aware of the truth for about maybe 4 years. See, I came into truth wanting to know myself, wanting to get to know who I was and compare, and how I fit in the scriptures. And that's where I come from. So, this is, I'm still learning. I can't say I know everything. When I came into truth, I asked questions. I tried to gain knowledge through that. I don't associate points that I don't know, because I can't say things I don't know anything about. I can't speak upon them. So that's what I try not to do. I try to make assumptions or, general statements that I can't back up with reasoning or thoughts or, facts. I'm glad that we had this conversation because, I respect all the women on this platform. I think that this is a great idea to be able to talk about different points and different perspectives and where we're at so that we can reach one another and come to we might not all agree on certain things. We can at least understand each other's perspective and how we fit in the scriptures, even if you're an outsider or not. I think this is a great opportunity for all women to be able to connect. It's a start for sisterhood. It's a start to be able to reach one another and to be able to communicate across different types of lines of, faith or, race or anything else like that. I think it's a great platform. I'm actually very privileged to be a part of, the sisterhood that we already have and that we're still implementing in the community. That's very important to me. I'm not going to touch the polygyny subject because I have my own thoughts about polygyny. I don't get into that because I had a thread that went left 2 years ago. I don't debate. I do not debate about polygyny.
It's a high topic, sis. It always is. It always is.
Right. I cannot get into that because I've been combated by brothers in truth from my position about polygyny. I will never change my position about polygyny. I will never engage in it. It's not something for me, but I embrace it for other women who can have the strength and love and compassion for it. I just can't do it. I can't do it. I'm not there yet. I probably it's not for me. I'm just gonna say that, not for me. But you know, I'm glad that we could talk about it. I have not read your book. I will definitely try to buy your book so I can support you, as well as read, you know, where you were coming from. And I'm sure there are parts in my life where I can relate to it because, like I said, I haven't done the work that Amuna and Mayana have done. I haven't been in truth for decades. I haven't been in truth to know the things that they have come across and been able to encounter. I don't know those struggles. You know, I call Sis Mayana, probably she could tell you on a daily basis, you know, just to communicate with her and get clarity about things. You know, so, you know, this is great. I love this situation, how we can come together, you know, and really tackle issues and really, you know, be respectful of one another. So I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I thank everybody for coming on and for going with us way into the night. 12 almost 30 where we at. The babies. But yeah, like everybody is saying, it's been a good conversation, one that has to continue on in a respectful manner, really setting the tone. Really, what we're doing is kind of setting the tone for how it is that we can converse even when we don't agree. And for the men who are listening, we don't hate our brothers, but we have to acknowledge that there are some issues that plague the men as well as the women. There is damage, there's trauma, and the men are taking what they, not all, but the ones who, like Mayana said, are in the spotlight, are in the forefront. They're taking this trauma and pointing that negative energy oftentimes towards the woman. So everybody has been abused, and now you're going to say, oh, you're the last person, so let me abuse you. And this is what we see oftentimes on the YouTube, on the streets, this conversation of downing the woman. And this is what is the pushback. Because you have women now who are waking up and saying, well, why are you dumping on me? You understand what I'm saying? And so this conversation needs to be had. We need to go off into the history where I love to go into and find out what happened in the history of slavery. What happened that this now is the situation that we're experiencing. You understand? Because the men oftentimes, and I'm not going to go there because it's late, but people don't like when I say it, but the men, it's historical in slavery that the percentages of men that ran away are greater than those who stayed. So he would be getting beat, she would be getting beat, she would be pregnant getting beat, and he would be like, I can't take this. And he runs away, and she stays. So the person who endured the most trauma on an ongoing basis while raising children is unequivocally the quote-unquote black woman. This
plays out. It plays out in society. It plays out.
And so this is what we're experiencing.
I'm a single mother. I was a single mother for 3 to 4 years, and it plays out. It plays out in the black community. You have the black man. He's facing struggles in a society, and he decides that his struggles are more important or they're too much to take, and he leaves, leaving the black woman to be able to fend for herself. And she has to be this strong, you know, this forefront, this empowerment. And so then when, you know, and this is what I see in situations where, I didn't mean to cut you off, Amina. In situations where the black man is absent and then the child, you know, becomes a different way than what they expect, then it's the black woman's fault. Right. And then when black women get blamed for how children are raised or how their offspring, and then we get so much negative, vile comments. But we didn't abandon our children. We didn't abandon the circumstance we went through. We took lemons and made lemonade out of them. And a lot of people might not agree with me, but you know, this is it plays out in slavery. The black man goes through a lot of stuff. He leaves, abandons his woman, and now the woman is faced to be this protector and provider, and it's made her harsh and critical. It made her, you know, it made her have a harder shell, and and you might not be able to handle that. But this is the cards we've dealt. We've made our cards, and we've played them out and tried to make our situation better for our offspring, so they wouldn't have to deal with this. This is just my perspective.
So we might have to come back and have a conversation on that, among other things. So once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. You guys stay with me while I hang up on, not hang up, I go off of air. Just stay with me once again. For those who stay up tonight, yes.
Emuna, I think that before you sign up, that you should plug your book, Angry Black Women, because a book brought out some very important things. So yeah, you try to sign off without getting it in. Go ahead, go get it in.
Okay, I wrote a book, Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited. You can go and check it out on Amazon or just look at on my website, emunayisrael.net or emunayisrael.com. Angry Black Woman is basically, it's a nonfiction book. It's historical in nature. It goes into the history of this narrative, the very same thing that Sister April was bringing out and I was bringing out, about how the woman came to this, quote, angry state. And so I go through history, I go through popular media, and show how this narrative is perpetuated, and it's done so not by accident. It's a control mechanism. It's something that when the racism, white supremacy wants to paint the woman who has been left alone to raise and have the responsibilities, he wants to paint her in a certain light. He calls her an angry black woman. He calls her a bee. He calls her obstinate. And what has happened is our men mocking and mimicking, like Mayana likes to say, not Father Abraham, but Abraham Lincoln, you know, or he likes to mimic the slave master. He takes the verbiage onto himself and he calls you this. Oh, you being angry. Oh, you a bee. You such and such. This is all coming from the oppression. And this is one of the symptoms of the oppression. So check out Angry Black Woman Syndrome Revisited. Good looking out, Sister Mayana. It's a book that people have given me feedback on, and you're going to see it. You see it in your media. You're going to see this stereotype. It's the mammy, it's the Jezebel, and it's the angry black woman. And when you look at popular media, it's the Sapphire, which is the angry black woman. You see this perpetuated. It's not black men that own the media houses. So we have to understand that this narrative goes beyond our community, and it's being perpetuated for a reason. So now we have to awaken ourselves and disconnect from it and choose to go about it in a different way. And so, good looking out, Sister Mayana. But with that said, I guess I'll put the link in the box. Thank everybody for tuning in, and we'll I guess according to what everybody's saying, we're gonna have to see you again very soon. So hold on one second. Have a good night.